Hello, and welcome to the Museum of Fine Arts, Boston. My name is Maureen Melton, and I am the museum's archivist and historian. The MFA was founded in February 1870, just 9 years after the NGV. And since its opening, every one of the more than 500,000 works of art the museum has acquired has come to us as the result of personal or institutional philanthropy. And of course, each object has an interesting story behind its acquisition. A big part of my job over the past 3 decades has been to discover and to share those stories. I am here to do just that, to tell you about some of the donors whose generosity has meant so much to the MFA. I'm especially delighted to talk with you about the museum's Impressionist collection, one of the finest in the world. And what better place could we choose to discuss donors of Impressionist art than here in the MFA's beautiful Impressionist gallery? People often have in their minds a stereotype of who the early donors to America's leading art museums were, and that is white Anglo-Saxon Protestant men of financial privilege. And of course, there are many generous men fitting that description who have donated works of art to the MFA over the years. But when you look more closely at the provenance of our collection, you may be surprised to learn that women donors also have played a key role in building the MFA's collection. In fact, the majority of the works of art in the exhibition at NGV were acquired by or donated to the MFA by women. Women artists, women collectors, women philanthropists, and women activists, all making key contributions to the museum's exceptional collection. I thought you might like to meet some of them, so let's get started. We begin with a woman who led a most interesting life, Annette Perkins Rogers, known as Anna. She was born in 1841, the only child of attorney Henry Rogers and his wife Anna, both hailing from highly successful Boston merchant families. Raised in comfort and dedicated to charitable works, in her 20s, Anna decided to explore her potential as an artist. She was a member of the first class of women to study with William Morris Hunt, who trained many notable women artists in Boston. She then launched her career as a professional artist. Anna was an illustrator and painter of portraits and landscapes. She exhibited at the Boston Art Club and many local galleries. Examples of her illustrations, such as this 1896 advertisement for Bachelor of Arts magazine, can be found in the collection of several major museums. Her paintings, such as Springtime Impressions, come up at auction very rarely. I wish I had known about this one before it sold in 2012. I would have put in a bid. While honing her skill as an artist, Anna was also a tireless advocate for social causes. Her mother's family, the Perkins, were the leading financial supporters of the renowned Perkins School for the Blind, established in the 1830s just outside of Boston. Anna served for many years as a trustee of the Perkins School, and through her volunteer efforts, she became a close friend of the school's most famous student, Helen Keller. In 1900, when Massachusetts established the State Commission for the Blind, Helen Keller and Anna Perkins Rogers were both appointed to its founding board. Anna was also a longtime leader of the Children's Aid Society, and she was the first woman appointed to Boston's Board of Overseers of the Poor. Even with her busy schedule of creating art and serving the community, Anna greatly enjoyed traveling and had the financial means to do so. Like many artists and adventurous Bostonians of the time, she was eager to visit France and see the work of the Impressionists. Arriving in Paris in 1890, she saw Monet's work at the Galerie de Ranruel and was dazzled. She was also decisive, quickly purchasing 2 paintings by the artist, both on view in this exhibition. Among the 35 paintings by Monet in the MFA's collection, Anna's were the first 2 purchased by the collector who donated them to the museum. Sadly, when she was in her early 60s, Anna lost her vision. While she could no longer create art, Anna continued her volunteer efforts with the charities she supported. Her decades of work with the blind gave her a unique understanding of the challenges she now faced, but a friend observed that it was her strength of personality that helped Anna cope with the loss of vision, writing, "When this time began, I know how wonderfully prepared she was to bear this trial without a murmur, facing it in the simple, direct way in which she met all difficulties and problems." Yet art was not gone from her life because of her blindness. A fellow artist noted that the Monet paintings she brought back from Paris had always been among Anna's greatest treasures, and that these cherished objects were deeply ingrained in Anna's mind, writing, "Her beautiful Monet that she brought back, a little hut on the dunes and the lovely sea light, was a great pleasure. I'm sure that the thought of these beautiful things, treasured in her mind, must have been a refreshment and comfort when in later years she could no longer see." After Anna's death in 1920, her Monet paintings came to the MFA by bequest, along with several other works of art. I think about Anna and her life of generosity whenever I see these two Monets, and I hope that next time you walk through the exhibition and see her prized possessions, you will stop and think about Anna as well. Now we turn to another great collector of art in Boston, Clara Bertram Kimball. Clara's father, John Bertram, had set out for a career at sea as a cabin boy at age 17. Rising quickly through the ranks, he became partner, then owner of that ship, and within 20 years he had acquired a fleet of vessels, trading in ports of call from Europe to Asia. While highly successful in business, Bertram always remembered his humble roots and was a leading philanthropist in Salem, Massachusetts. Clara was born in 1838. And while her father's business interests made Clara a wealthy young woman, his commitment to philanthropy greatly influenced her as well. In 1858, Clara married David Kimball, a Harvard-educated attorney who built a fortune by investing in local railroads during the post-Civil War transportation boom. Their combined wealth allowed Clara to pursue one of her great passions, and she became a connoisseur and collector of art. She acquired works by American artists, including Winslow Homer and Edmund Tarbell. She also filled her home with lively works by leading Impressionists. Clara's wealth gave her the freedom to collect art, but it was her skilled eye that led her to acquire works of timeless quality. In addition to her interest in art, Clara was active in many local charities. She was also deeply committed to women's education and funded the construction of the first 2 dormitories at Radcliffe College for women. Clara was also deeply committed to the women's suffrage movement, serving in the leadership of the Massachusetts Women's Suffrage Association. So Clara was no doubt devastated when in 1915, the men of Massachusetts voted against women's suffrage by a margin of more than 2-1. However, less than 5 years later, in August 1920, the 19th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution was ratified, successfully ending the 72-year battle for women's suffrage. On November 2nd, 1920, more than 8 million women turned out at the polls to cast their votes for the first time. Sadly, Clara Bertram Kimball was not among them. She died earlier that year, on February 25th, 1920. She left her art collection to her husband, David, as they had agreed it would come to the MFA after his death. When David died 3 years later, the museum received 40 notable paintings collected by his wife and given in her memory. But lest anyone mistakenly think that he was the one who assembled this fine collection of paintings, David spelled it out in his will, declaring, "I give to the Museum of Fine Arts Boston, in memory of my beloved wife, Clara Bertram Kimball, 40 paintings from the collection made by her and bequeathed to me." As a result, Clara Kimball's accomplishments as a collector and her legacy to the MFA remain perfectly clear and deeply appreciated. 3 paintings acquired by Clara Bertram Kimball are on view in this exhibition. Now that you've met Clara, I hope you will look at these paintings with a new appreciation for this outstanding social activist and collector. Next, we turn our focus to the fascinating Lilla Cabot Perry. In her early 20s, Lilla Cabot married Thomas Sargent Perry, who, like her, hailed from a well-established Boston family. Thomas was a scholar, a linguist, and an essayist, but unfortunately, in none of those professions did he make enough money to adequately support a family of 3 children who were born in quick succession. Lilla decided that one way she could help with the family finances was to become a professional artist. Now, of course, she was naturally skilled. It's not like most of us can just decide to become an artist, but Lilla's talent was equal to her ambition. And luckily, she lived at a time in American history when, finally, it was acceptable for women to study and apprentice with established artists, and then go on to create art and find a market for their work. So Lilla began painting and seeking commissions, which was made all the more profitable by the speed with which she worked. Writing to Bernard Berenson many years later, she confided that once, when her family was, as she put it, very hard up, she painted 13 portraits in 13 weeks. In 1889, Lilla and her family were traveling in Paris when she was greatly inspired by an exhibition of Claude Monet's work. She wanted to meet the artist and learn from him. Well, Monet was an artist, not a teacher, and he did not take on students. But undeterred, Lilla and her family moved for the summer to Giverny, where Monet lived. And soon enough, the charming Lilla struck up a friendship with the town's most famous resident. Beginning that summer, and for 8 summers to follow, the two artists painted together often. The MFA's collection includes several candid photographs Lilla took during those years of her friend Monet relaxing in his garden. Fortuitously for the museum, Lilla shared her enthusiasm for Monet's work with her friends and family. That included her brother, Dr. Arthur Tracy Cabot, a leading Boston surgeon, art lover, and MFA trustee. Dr. Cabot asked his sister to acquire for him 2 paintings by the French master. Knowing Monet's work intimately, Lilla chose 2 of her favorite works, a view of the windy Cap d'Antibes and Meadow with Haystack near Giverny. You might notice similarities between this work by Monet and Lilla's painting from 1896, Haystacks, Giverny, that reflect the close association between these 2 unlikely friends and fellow artists. The 2 Monet paintings remained in Dr. Cabot's family for several decades. In 1942, they came to the museum through the bequest of his widow, Susan Shattuck Cabot, who donated them along with many other works of art that enhance our American and Impressionist holdings. Both of the Monets Lilla acquired for her brother are on view in this exhibition. Next, we turn to the remarkable Pauline Agassiz Shaw. She was the daughter of famed naturalist and scholar Louis Agassiz, who moved to America in 1847 to teach at Harvard. 2 years after his wife Cecile's death, in 1850, Agassiz remarried to a woman 15 years his junior named Elizabeth Cary. Lizzie Cary was an intellectual from a wealthy family who became a leading proponent for progressive causes, especially education for women. She would later become a co-founder and first president of Radcliffe College for Women, which later merged with Harvard University. Lizzie was a great influence on her stepdaughter Pauline, who would soon have the financial capability to fulfill many of their shared goals, because at the age of only 19, Pauline married Quincy Adams Shaw. Shaw had the good fortune to have been born into one of Boston's wealthiest families, which left young Quincy in the enviable position of having no need to rush into a business career following his graduation from Harvard in 1845. He spent years exploring America and then embarked on a grand tour of Europe. In 1851, in no hurry to return home, Shaw decided to take up residence in Paris, enjoying the company of musicians, writers, and artists. He stayed in Paris for 8 years and became especially enamored of the work of the Barbizon artists, and in particular of Jean-François Millet. In his early 30s, Shaw finally returned home to begin a career in business, and not long thereafter, he met and married young Pauline Agassiz. By all accounts, the Shaws had a happy marriage, raising 5 children on their large estate in Boston, and Quincy had a most successful career. He used his inherited wealth to invest in a new venture, a copper mine in Michigan, working in partnership with his brother-in-law, Alexander Agassiz, a chemist and engineer. After some early financial challenges, the company became one of the most successful mining operations in the nation, and Shaw was dubbed the Copper Tycoon by the popular press. He added to his portfolio with investments in real estate and railroads. While the Shaws enjoyed great financial success, placing the couple in the ranks of Boston's leading taxpayers, they were also among Boston's leading philanthropists. In the 1870s, Pauline became involved in the emerging movement for early childhood education. Convinced of the need for kindergartens throughout the city, but finding little interest from elected officials, Pauline Shaw decided to take matters into her own hands. She became the sole funder of public kindergartens in Boston, and by the early 1880s, she was funding all 14 of the city's programs. Eventually, city leaders recognized the importance of kindergartens and took on the responsibility of funding them, which allowed Pauline to shift her financial resources to other social programs in which she was involved. In 1882, Pauline founded America's first trade school, the North Bennett Street Industrial School. The school provided job training for thousands of immigrants arriving in Boston in the latter part of the 19th century. She also founded several settlement houses to provide affordable accommodations and social services for immigrants, as well as creating daycare programs for the children of working women. All of the educational and social organizations Pauline supported were open and accessible to everyone, regardless of gender, race, or creed. Pauline was also an active supporter of female suffrage, and she and her husband Quincy were noted advocates for prison reform, understanding that at the root of many crimes was poverty, not choice. While all these activities kept the couple very busy, the Shaws did find time for several extended trips to Europe, where they began to amass a stellar collection of work by Millet, the artist Shaw had so greatly admired during his bachelor years in Paris. The couple purchased works by Millet from other collectors, as well as from American and French dealers. And in 1872, they even commissioned a painting from the artist himself, Priory at Vauvy, Normandy. In total, the Shaws acquired more than 50 paintings and works on paper created by Millet. Following the deaths of Quincy Adams Shaw in 1908 and Pauline Shaw in 1917, their children donated the couple's renowned collection of Millets to the MFA, along with work by many other important artists. One of my favorite Millet paintings, a view of a hamlet at the edge of the artist's hometown, is on view in this exhibition. Whenever I see a work of art donated to the MFA by Pauline Shaw, I remember with admiration this trailblazing and generous social activist. This exhibition features 10 paintings from the Juliana Cheney Edwards collection, which might lead you to think that they were paintings owned and donated by a woman named Juliana Cheney Edwards, right? I certainly did, until I began a deeper historical dive into the collection, which includes more than 50 works of art. What I found out was that Juliana Cheney Edwards never owned, nor ever even saw, any of the paintings in the collection that bears her name. The collection was assembled well after her death by her children, Hannah, Grace, and Robert Edwards, and donated to the MFA in memory of their mother. Juliana's story is a fascinating one, as it begins in perilous financial circumstances and ends in comfortable luxury. One of 4 daughters of Hiram and Martha Cheney, Juliana was born in 1826 in Southbridge, a rural town in central Massachusetts. In 1829, Martha Cheney fell ill and died, followed just a year later by her husband. Suddenly, the 4 young Cheney sisters faced a precarious future, orphans with no family to support and raise them. Fortunately, Hiram and Martha had friends in town, including a local couple who had agreed to take guardianship of the Cheney sisters should anything happen to their parents. So the orphans were welcomed into the family of Hannah and Jacob Edwards. The Edwards sons were industrious young men who in 1833 began building a small dry goods business that would become one of the most successful in the area. One of the sons, and namesake of his father, was Jacob Edwards. Jacob was 15 when his family took guardianship of the Cheney girls, but over the years his relationship with Juliana blossomed into a romantic attachment. When she was in her early 20s, Jacob Edwards and Juliana Cheney married. Soon after that, they moved to Boston, where Jacob established a thriving dry goods firm. As the Edwards business empire continued to expand, so too did their family. Juliana and Jacob built a fine home in Boston where they raised their 3 children. Juliana taught the children to appreciate art and music and other cultural pursuits. She was also a generous philanthropist who encouraged her family to remember and to assist those less fortunate. Along with this growing family, Jacob Edwards was growing his business portfolio. making lucrative investments in banks, railroads, and real estate. His most important investment was a large cotton mill in the state of Maine, the highly profitable Edwards Manufacturing Company. Jacob and Juliana enjoyed life with their 3 adult children for many decades. Juliana died in 1897, followed by Jacob 5 years later. The 3 unmarried siblings continued living together, moving into an elegant townhouse in downtown Boston and building a country home north of the city. As they had no children to inherit their substantial family fortune, in addition to the charities with which they were already involved, the siblings decided to create a special tribute to their mother. In appreciation for the finer things in life that Juliana had shared with them, they would assemble a collection of notable works of art and donate it to the MFA as the Juliana Cheney Edwards Collection, ensuring that their mother's name would be remembered by museum visitors in perpetuity. Fortunately for us, their main collecting interest was Impressionist paintings. For nearly 20 years, the Edwards siblings built their collection with significant purchases: 10 paintings by Monet, 6 by Renoir, 3 by Sisley, along with good representation of the work of many other Impressionist masters. Robert Edwards died in 1924. He left generous bequests to hospitals, libraries, and colleges, while the majority of his estate was left in trust to his 2 sisters. Hannah Edwards died in 1929. Like her brother, Hannah made generous bequests to local charities and then left most of her $1.5 million estate to her sister Grace. However, Hannah expressed the desire that after the 3 siblings died, financial bequests should be made to members of their extended family, including cousins and their children. Unfortunately, the vague language in Hannah's will greatly complicated the estate of Grace Edwards, who died in 1938. After making gifts to a number of individuals, Grace's will expressed her desire to donate all of her remaining wealth, combined from her parents and her 2 siblings, to charity. Grace Edwards' estate was estimated at over $3 million, equivalent to more than $56 million today. She earmarked $1.5 million to a fund that would support college education for needy boys and girls from the Boston public schools, with specific instructions that there be no barrier as to gender, race, or creed. There was a pledge of $100,000 to the MFA and bequests made to many other worthy charities. The other very large bequest was made to the renowned Massachusetts General Hospital, more than $1.3 million. However, Grace's will was immediately contested by many parties, including relatives who felt they were owed money through the will of her sister Hannah. As so often happens when great fortunes are at stake, things got nasty. Lawyers for the 20 contestants to Grace's will said they would produce evidence challenging it, based on mental infirmity, threatening to expose details of Grace's extended stays at a psychiatric hospital that was part of Mass General Hospital, suggesting undue influence. Soon after that threat, the judge was able to work out a compromise. There was a drastic reduction in the amount of money to be received by the well-endowed hospital, which apparently had no appetite for a protracted and public legal battle. The reduction resulted in a windfall for complaining relatives. The college fund for needy students was left intact, as were the bequests to local charities and the MFA. As a result, the museum received from the Edwards family a generous endowment for future acquisitions, as well as the long-promised and exceptional collection of more than 50 American and French paintings, including dozens of Impressionist masterworks. Next time you visit the exhibition, I hope you will enjoy seeing these 10 paintings, given in loving memory of their mother by her 3 devoted children. Our next formidable woman collector had the formidable name of Henrietta Goddard Wigglesworth Holmes Fitz. Born in 1847, Henrietta was the daughter of a well-to-do Boston attorney, and in her early 20s, she in turn married a well-to-do Boston attorney. Her husband was Edward Jackson Holmes, who hailed from one of Boston's most distinguished families. He was the son of the beloved American poet and essayist, Dr. Oliver Wendell Holmes, and brother of Supreme Court Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes, Jr. Unlike his renowned father, Dr. Holmes, who lived until age 85, and his brother, Justice Holmes, who lived to 93, Edward Holmes was in frail health most of his life, suffering from asthma and related illnesses. Henrietta and Edward had 2 children, a daughter who died very young, and a son born in 1873 and named for his father, Edward Jackson Holmes, but known as Ned. Henrietta and Edward both had a deep passion for art and architecture, interests they shared with their son from an early age. In 1883, when Ned Holmes was just 10 years old, the family traveled to Italy and Greece, sparking in the boy a lifelong devotion to the arts and to museums. Speaking about his father decades later, Holmes remembered, "He made me feel the fire of the spirit in temples, cathedrals, statues, and paintings, as well as the importance of museums as preservers of our world inheritance." The trip was well-timed, because the next year Edward Holmes died at only 37, leaving Henrietta a widow with an 11-year-old son. 4 years after the death of her husband, Henrietta married again, and her new husband was an old friend. In 1878, her older sister, Anna, had married a highly successful China trade merchant named Walter Scott Fitz. Sadly, Anna died only 4 months later, while still on their extended honeymoon. Henrietta remained friends with her widowed brother-in-law, and in 1888, she married Mr. Fitz. Henrietta had long been a figure in Boston society as an art collector and generous supporter of many charitable organizations. But her second husband's impressive wealth allowed Henrietta to become an even more generous patron of the arts. It also provided a more luxurious lifestyle for the family, including a spectacular country house and garden north of Boston. Henrietta's son would follow in the footsteps of his father and uncle, studying at Harvard and becoming an attorney. However, his true love, like that of his mother, remained art. Henrietta and Ned continued to appreciate and acquire art together for decades to come, building a large and diverse art collection together. They both became closely involved with the MFA, donating gifts of art and much-needed financial support. While still practicing law, in 1907, Ned Holmes was appointed chairman of the visiting committee of the museum's Japanese art department. Ned was instrumental in organizing a subscription fund for the purchase of Japanese art, and Henrietta was the leading contributor. Among the many gifts given to the museum during those years by Mrs. Fitz was one of the 2 Monet paintings in her collection. In 1911, Ned Holmes was appointed to the MFA Board of Trustees, and in 1925, he took on a far larger role. After the museum's director resigned, Ned Holmes volunteered to serve as temporary director. As he later wrote, "When circumstances permitted me to do what I wanted, I gave my whole life and thought to the Boston Museum of Fine Arts." After just a few months in that temporary role, Holmes was appointed director, a position in which he would serve until 1934, when he was elected president of the museum. Henrietta died in 1929 at the age of 81, having seen her son become the leader of the organization to which they were both devoted. During her lifetime and through her bequest, the MFA received from Henrietta hundreds of gifts of art, along with funds used to purchase many more. She made generous donations to almost all of the museum's curatorial departments. There were Asian paintings, textiles, and sculpture, American and European paintings and decorative arts, and ancient artifacts from Greece and Rome. Ned Holmes retained many of his favorite works of art that he and his mother had collected together, enjoying them in his home while planning to donate most to the museum after his death. Ned's wife, Mary, was also a collector of art, and the couple continued to expand their holdings over the next several decades. They also continued making gifts to the museum, including Henrietta's other painting by Monet, Water Lilies, which Ned donated in 1939 and which is on view in this exhibition. In their wills, both Ned and Mary Holmes made substantial gifts of art to the museum. In total, more than 4,000 works of art were given by the Holmes family to the MFA, a truly inspiring tale of philanthropy. Thus, the generosity of a notable woman philanthropist and art collector continued to enrich the museum through the generosity of her son and daughter-in-law. And now, finally, one last story, and this one has romance. On their extended honeymoon in Paris in 1891, Annie Lamb and her husband Horatio took the suggestion of Horatio's sister to see the work of Monet. The artist was all the rage among Bostonians traveling and studying in Paris at the time. Horatio's sister was artist Rose Lamb, a portrait painter and drawing instructor who, like so many artists of the period, had studied under William Morris Hunt. Here is one of her paintings, the portrait of an unidentified woman from a private collection. Following Rose's advice, the newlyweds visited the Paris Gallery, where 15 works from Monet's Stacks of Wheat series were on view. Annie and Horatio were so enthralled that they decided to spend their wedding gift money to buy one of those works, painted just a few months earlier, Grand Stack Snow Effect, which is on view in this exhibition. I always think of this painting as the honeymoon Monet, and because of its romantic acquisition, it was treasured by the couple throughout their lives. The Monet was inherited by Annie and Horatio's daughters, Rosamond Lamb and her sister Amy, who, like her Aunt Rose, was a skilled artist. But unlike her aunt, Amy did not have to seek private instruction from a local artist. She attended the School of the Museum of Fine Arts, an institution that from its opening in 1876 has provided professional training to artists based on their talent, regardless of their gender, race, or creed. The Lamb sisters enjoyed the painting in their home for decades, and in 1970, the year of the MFA centennial, they donated it to the museum. I hope that in your next visit to the exhibition, you will look for this painting and all of the other works of art donated by these impressive women collectors who played such a vital role in creating the MFA's world-renowned Impressionist collection. Thank you.